One of my friends, I thank you for joining us on the Gallo Show live from the Trustmark Studios. And with me is the Lieutenant Governor. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. It's good to see you.
Jeez Louise.
I know you've had a morning here.
98 degrees the high today, 98 degrees the high tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's summertime in Mississippi. Look, there's so much to talk about.
Yes, sir.
And the election is around the corner as far as the primary is concerned. Saturday is July.
Right. August the 8th is a primary for the Democrats and Republicans in Mississippi.
I do want to ask you first and foremost, because July is Saturday, July 1st is Saturday, so that means the new rules and regulations or the new laws, most of them, some have already gone into effect, and I think there are a couple that become active January of 2024. But for the most part, we've got quite a few that become law.
Yeah, we have.
Any specific ones you want to mention?
Well,
here?
one I think that kind of slipped up because, as you know, a lot of media doesn't get very in depth, Paul. Just might put it that way.
I've seen that.
So in any event, they're not like you. So in any event, one of them is that the legislature, in its wisdom, passed a bill out of the Senate and passed by the House, signed by the governor, that says that you can immediately write off every capital expense 100%. So if you have, for example, you're working in a truck, you've got a work truck. When you buy a new one, you write it off 100% instead of being over 3 years or 5 years. So that is a great benefit for people. And I did have a hand in this one. It's very important, I think, to encourage people to buy capital equipment, because what do? Then they go hire somebody to run their capital equipment. So it's a job creator, and what we effectively do by doing that, instead of getting our tax revenues by having them depreciate over 3 or 5 years, for example, 20% a year, they write it all off the first year, but the second year they don't have any deduction, and we get our taxes back off the next 4 years. So it's a little bit of an incentive for us. It postpones us getting some taxes for a while, but it's a great incentive for people to do capital expenses in Mississippi, and I'm encouraging you. We've talked to several. One trucking company that I talked to is going to buy almost 100 trucks. Now that's a big deal. Trucks they're not like our Ford F-150s are $60,000 or $70,000 now, but these are big trucks and they're very expensive, and so that's a very good indicator. And of course they'll have somebody to drive them.
The just some of the laws that take effect is Senate Bill 2358 is the absentee ballot law. We have the postpartum Medicaid. We have the school guardian law, which was Senate Bill 2079, authorizes school employees, they may carry concealed guns. There's a lot of things you have to go through, but you can have a concealed carry there.
That's correct.
Online porn, Senate Bill 2346, requires people to verify they are at least 18 years old before using the websites or apps where they are at least one-third of the consent consist of pornography. Yeah. Is that technically already ready to go for Saturday?
Yes, and of course that's in the schools, and so our schools are out. Most of them are out of session right now. We have some that are in summer school, but most schools are out of session. So
this is only in schools then?
Yeah, it'll come out in August.
And then the fentanyl testing.
There are some others. That is covered in some other things, I think, Paul. I just remember the schools part particularly.
An adult entertainment group is suing over some law in Louisiana, so who knows if the lawsuit's going to happen here, too.
Yeah, I saw that, too, so I'm sure we'll get sued.
There were laws on adoption. Senate Bill 2696 creates an income tax credit for up to $10,000 on adopting a child who lives in Mississippi, and $5,000 for adopting a child from outside the state. So we've fortified the adoption laws and rules and made it a little bit easier and more incentive to do so.
That's right. That was part of the study group that Senator Nicole Boyd headed up. After we won Roe v. Wade and decision with the Dobbs case, we started to concentrate on what do we do with babies that are born up to 3 years old. And that's one of the things we found. Our adoption process was difficult. People adopting a baby is a big deal, Paul. I mean, it's taking another child into many of these are families that have children already. It's expensive to raise a child, as you know. And so the legislature wanted these good Samaritans that are taking these children in to be their own, really, for their entire lives. We thought they deserved that tax credit. That doesn't cover nearly enough of what their expenses are.
Yeah. There are some rules or some laws that help make the foster program in our state a little
Right.
bit safer, and there was also sexual
Right.
assault evidence, House Bill 485,
Right.
intended to set faster timelines for law enforcement agencies to process evidence kits from sexual assault
Right,
cases.
that's the rape kits, and
Yeah.
we found those were being delayed. We have been working hard with Commissioner Tyndall on our crime lab, Paul, and it is performing very much better, but not really at the standards that the legislature believes it should be, particularly on crimes like that, on rape kits, that kind of thing, getting back so they'd have an answer quickly. And also, our autopsies were way behind when Commissioner Tyndall came in to office. We're much better now on murders and things like that, but we're still lagging behind. And we had trouble hiring people, even though money was appropriated for that. It's been difficult at the crime lab, but we're better. But we're not. I don't think the legislature, any of the legislature, is satisfied as to the time yet.
One of the more important ones that we've been bantering around for a while, and thank goodness, because life is better in Mississippi now, is the pecan theft. We finally got that one done.
Senator Seymour argued that on the floor, and I think it was late one afternoon. I wish I could play back the discussion, but
well, we ought to carve his name in a lot of pecan trees.
I'm not going there, but some of that came up on during the discussion.
Gender affirming care, pregnancy
But Paul,
centers.
in his defense, Paul, when you steal a 50-pound bag of pecans.
Oh no, I agree with him 100%.
Yeah,
You're
that's
right.
not
I mean,
that's not just inexpensive. So.
It's almost like gold in some cases. Baby drop off. We had House Bill 1318 allowing cities and counties to establish safe drop off areas.
Right. We do that where we have a safe box, and it's not like a real box. It's something that would hold a baby and whatnot. And we thought that was important for moms post Dobbs and Roe v. Wade, that moms may not want to have a baby. They could drop the baby off, no questions asked. We want to make sure that someone doesn't make a decision at that particular time when they're very vulnerable and under a lot of pressure and whatnot, to make a decision that would be fatal and of course, criminal, actually.
And we've got two that take effect January the 1st of the new year, 2024, and that's the election law, House Bill 1310, and House Bill 1306 is a campaign finance law. You want to speak to those?
Yeah, we stopped ballot harvesting, Paul. That was one of mine. I have to admit to it. I was real argumentative that we needed to have that. And when I was Secretary of State, when y'all hired me to do that, we had one person up in East Mississippi that witnessed 150 ballots, and the clerk and I talked about that. And that, I don't know that person was a great American. I just think there was skullduggery. So we really tried to get that person prosecuted, and the DA at the time refused to prosecute, said they had too many other murders and stuff, and this was a lesser crime. Well, it's not a lesser crime to me. It means 150 votes went into our election, and in actuality, in that particular city, it swung one of the absentee votes swung one of the alderman's shares.
So we call that the Ike Brown bill, or what?
Well, Ike was even more accomplished at that than that, actually. So he lost in federal court and was under federal court order for a long time.
This is what, your fourth political campaign?
Let's see, it'd be fifth, actually.
How much? Fifth?
Yes, sir.
All right, was it two in Secretary of State?
Oh, we had three for Secretary of State. Once,
three, okay.
And then the lieutenant governor.
I got it.
And then I'm running again for the position to get rehired.
The message to the voters, because this one's going to be contentious. The primary, we understand all of the stuff going back and forth. Why would, just a message to the voters, why should they reelect you as over your primary challenger for the state of Mississippi's lieutenant governor again?
Well, of course, the main reason is our record, Paul. I don't know if we've got enough time on the session, but just to summarize it, we have 2,300 less state employees by attrition. We have shrunk the size of government. We have 5,700 less pens than we had 4 years ago when you hired me. We paid off $500 million in state debt. We've had $500 million tax cut. We've had a $600 million infrastructure bill. We paid our teachers another $6,000 a year. We poured money into hospitals, $100 million, into emergency road and bridges to fix county roads, $100 million. We've done all of that. We paid off debt, lowered the tax rate, and we're a very solvent state. I think we're running Mississippi like a business, and anytime you look at that, most people would be pleased.
We got more with the Lieutenant Governor coming up right after this. Our studio's got lots to ask the governor, lieutenant governor, and not a lot of time in one segment here, so let me jump into it quickly here. And again, thank you for coming in and spending some time with us. If you are reelected, it looks like the push is going to be from one side of is on Medicaid expansion, and on the other side there's going to be a push for us going for lower taxes. And your stand in those past 4 years and the many times that you've been with me and we've talked seems to be yes on Medicaid. And as far as lower taxes, the bill came up in the Senate. It was blocked. Didn't get a chance to go to the floor for a vote, as I remember it. Have I painted that in the right terms as far as Medicaid? You'd like to see it expanded, and as far as taxes?
No, actually, that's wrong, Paul. And
okay.
And I've told you that before, but I'll tell it to you again. I have been all over Mississippi on health care. I've been in the Greenwood Hospital. They're losing $1.5 million a month there. I've been in hospitals from up north Mississippi to meeting with executive directors and presidents of hospitals as late as last night. And all of them, to a person, tell me that Medicaid expansion will not save the hospitals of the delivery of health care in Mississippi. And I have said that before, and I want to be very clear about that right now. This past year, we passed a bill to give $103 million out to hospitals, including Greenwood and others, to keep them basically afloat and help them with their groups. I was in a hospital yesterday in Ripley, Mississippi. Their share of that is going to be about $700,000. It is the model, I think, for where we're going forward. They tore down the old hospital, literally, or tearing it down. They have built a new one with, I think, about 24 beds or so, emergency room, primary care, those kinds of things. And then they'll send more difficult patients or have other health cares off to either Tupelo or some other location. That is the answer to health care. In October, Paul, we'll have the first hearings on what will be called the determining the standard of care for every county in Mississippi. Then we start to determine what the funding would be. To simply pour money into the bucket that's leaking would be a mistake, Paul.
Wait, I mean, because we have suppressed time here, I'm really not. I understand that. I agree with you 100% that Medicaid's expansion is not the
no, it's not
saving grace for hospitals.
No,
but I'm talking
not.
about. I was talking more about our conversations as far as the people who are underserved as far as health care in the state, expanding Medicaid, not so much the hospital side of this. But do you think that would be pushed in the next 4 years if you're reelected to expand Medicaid for that group up to 138% of poverty?
No, and I can come back again, Paul.
All right. This is what have it on record to hear you say that.
Nobody's ever had me say that we wanted to expand Medicaid, and let me be clear about that. With all due respect to you and to the press as a whole, that's a lazy answer. That's a lazy question because it's one that's a hot button issue to try to get somebody to be for or against something that won't work right now.
So you're saying it could be in some other form, not called Medicaid expansion?
No, what we need to do, Paul, and clearly is go back and look at all of these. A lot of these hospitals and whatnot are declining and can't make it and are in institutions they can't make it. For example, Paul, when you say you're going to expand Medicaid, what you're doing is giving people the right to pay to the hospitals. A recipient is the hospital. So when you talk about that, and let me give you some examples of ones that are working from last week. Covington, I was in the McGee Hospital, spent the afternoon there, walking door to door, in and out, talking to the nurses. Greg Gibbs, who runs that, he runs 3 hospitals, and as of Saturday, he will be running the one in Laurel. So that aggregate of those hospitals, they have been able to share their radiologists, the expenses, have people come in, and it's
Governor,
done.
I agree with you 100%. I think, and I've said it on the air more than one time, I think the problems with the hospitals are something that's a socio-economic, cultural,
That is correct.
environmental, everything else you want to talk
It has
about,
a lot of
above
problems.
and beyond that. And if you're losing money on Medicaid, expanding Medicaid doesn't seem to be the answer.
It's not, Paul.
And I agree with you 100%. Let me go back to the taxes real quick.
Yeah.
Why did the Senate not give that chance a chance on the floor? Is it because they overhauled the body, thought it might have been fiscally irresponsible?
Well, Paul, I'm not sure which side of the bed you got on today.
Mm-hmm.
When this started, Paul, they wanted to eliminate the income tax. So let me tell you what they wanted to do. They wanted to increase 2.5% the sales tax, and we've been the highest sales tax other than Tennessee in the country, in the whole country. They wanted to increase the sales tax. They were going to do away with the income tax, either immediately, as currently they're talking about, or up to a period of 2036, which was 14 years from now. What we did was eliminate the 5% rate, go to 4.7, 4.4, and 4%. We're on track to actually eliminate the income tax faster than they started, and without raising the sales tax. We're not raising anybody's taxes. Now, as we've done that, Paul, we have cut taxes $500 million. We have paid off a rainy day fund. We have $500 million less debt. We pay off 12% of the state's debt. So we are doing this in an organized way. Now, if you say let's eliminate all of the grocery taxes and the income taxes, $2.2 billion. That, by the way, equals the exact amount we would have to have for education. So we would just close the schools. It doesn't work, Paul. What works is an organized fashion of taking it down a step at a time, which we're doing.
You and I have talked a lot over the years. Please don't take the question as my political ideology or what I'm asking you these questions. For instance, your opponent constantly, the slogan is Delbert's a Democrat. Is that because...
I ran on a Republican primary, I think, six times or whatever.
In a Republican primary, you would expect this, and you're a toughened guy. You've been through these campaigns before. But it goes back to the committee chairman that I had a very, very bad problem with at the beginning when it was announced who the chairmanships were on health and several other key committees. And it's a two-part question. Or will those same chairmen be put back in place if any of them survive their election, and et cetera, et cetera? Will they be back in the same position there? Will it be the same Democrats holding those committee chairmanships?
Well,
and the other question is, and I asked Philip Begun on this one, and it rides off of that question, are there just too many committees in the House and Senate?
Well, there are 41 committees in the Senate. Every one, I think maybe except for the one you mentioned, healthcare, is manned by a Republican appointed by Delbert Hosemann. I'd say 95% of the legislation proposed in the Senate comes from Republicans from committees appointed by Delbert Hosemann. Delbert Hosemann appointed more Republicans to head committees than did Tate Reeves or Phil Bryant. Now, there are some Democrats that are head of committees, and I'm sure the Library and the Labor Committee and the Housing Committee meet, but they have no legislation. The individual you discuss on health care, Senator Hob Bryan, had been there 40 years, and he had been appointed head of judiciary and health care and all other things by Phil Bryant and everybody else. Now, two appointments. The appointments are not given to the lieutenant governor. I guess you knew that already. Under the rules allow the lieutenant governor to do that. When the Senate meets at the very start of the session, they can determine whether or not the lieutenant governor appoints anybody. They give me that right this last time because they trust me to be fair, and also obviously I report 90-something% of all the meaningful committees go to Republicans, but they don't have to do that. It used before Brad Dye.
Can you tell me the last time that didn't
Brad
happen?
Dye was the one that started that. Before him, the Rules Committee said it. So the next time, if I was not Lieutenant Governor, the Rules Committee would name all the chairmen, and the Lieutenant Governor would not.
to answer the question, with the same people, with the same committee chairman, or that's up for grabs?
No.
On re-election?
First of all, I think it's illegal to promise, chairmanships to anybody. I have no promises to anyone to be appointed to anything.
Let me
the
ask you
first
about
thing, but
grocery
remember,
taxes.
Paul, the first thing is the Rules Committee gets elected, not me. Then they decide whether
And
or
they
not
could change
they
that.
could change that, and they
That's
decide
right.
whether or not I could
Yep.
appoint them or not. When they do that, then I can
Mm-hmm.
take the steps that I might deem appropriate. And usually you mix and mingle, in successive years has been the history.
What
You
would
mix
your
and mingle.
objectives be for the grocery tax in 4 years?
Well, grocery tax should be reduced, Paul.
I saw this readout on how much money the municipalities. I think Madison gets more than just about anybody else in the state. They were number one. Hinds County is number two, of course. But that's most important to the operation of these municipalities. I asked this question before, and I have never really gotten an answer that this small brain could digest. But it's made up of two things. The state gets some, and the House gets some, and the municipalities get some.
Right.
Why couldn't we just take the part the state has and then just reduce it from there? Look,
100%.
I wish we had more time. I
Well,
do, and I thank you,
let
sir.
me answer this before you
Yeah.
finish it. The
You got
number is
15 seconds.
440 million,
Mm-hmm.
and there are ways to parse that. Without question, all the cities would have to be maintained at their current rate, no matter what you do with the rest of it.
Got it.
They live off of that, Paul. So and particularly in small towns.
The one and only Delbert Hosemann, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of